So as you're surely aware, Kyrie Irving, star point guard for the Brooklyn Nets, has not been able to play home games for the Brooklyn Nets basketball team. And that is because of New York City's vaccine mandates that cover the citizens of New York City as well as employees of the city and other private businesses and public spaces. To help us unpack some would call it Kyrie loophole and just the intersection of sports and local politics and public health is Kristian Winfield, NBA reporter for the New York Daily News, who covers the Knicks and Nets and has been covering all the developments, including recent comments by New York City Mayor Eric Adams that popped off just this morning. Kristian, thank you so much for joining Takeline.
Man, when I tell you, I wish I paid a little more attention in political science class in college now, because I'm over here on the phone with City Hall people and they don't want to talk to me. It's a headache, man. But that's where we are with this team.
That's where we are. Okay, so Eric Adams said this morning, after in recent days seeming to signal that he'd like to see Kyrie on the court. He said, quote,
"It would send the wrong message just to have an exception for one player when we're telling a countless number of New York City employees, if you don't follow the rules, you won't be able to be employed." Now,
it seems like the vaccine and mask mandates are going to change next week, but where are we right now in terms of this situation with regards to Kyrie Irving?
So Eric Adams is going to make an official decision on March 4th as to whether he's going to repeal the key to New York City vaccine mandate. But there's a second private sector vaccine mandate that will allow Kyrie to walk into Barclays Center and watch his teammates. He just won't be able to step out there and play basketball. And that's kind of one of the sticking points for the team, because they're confused as to why Kyrie can't play, but opposing players with who are not vaccinated can come in and play. And we've seen Adam Silver come in and speak about this. But when you listen to the mayor and you hear his comments, he's saying, hey, as you mentioned, we don't want to send the wrong message because we're asking healthcare workers to get vaccinated. We're asking businesses and educators. All these people have to get vaccinated. Why do we want to bend the rules in favor of just one player? And that's where we are.
Yeah, this annoys me as well. Charles Barkley also, before the All-Star game on TNT, was talking about how this loophole that makes it so Kyrie can't play home games, but unvaccinated players coming from Indianapolis or Charlotte could come in and play. Adam Silver said on February 16th.
This law in New York, the oddity of it to me is that it only applies to home players.
Now, here's the thing that annoys me, Kristian, and now I'm just going to vent at you, even though I had you on. I feel like Charles is one thing. I feel like the commissioner could have at least laid out why it is the rule and the law appeared in the form that it took. New York City is most in its rights to pass laws that pertain to the citizens of New York City, right? Sure. It can't pass a law for somebody who lives in Washington State unless it wants to cut itself off of or unduly complicate movement of people from Washington State to New York City, right? It's just easier to pass the law for the people in New York State. We get it. Now, one of the really weird things about it is now all of a sudden Kyrie can't play home games when unvaccinated players from other places can come in and do it. Is that stupid? I guess it seems a little silly, but I would like to remind everybody that these rules were passed in the middle of a pandemic that was taking thousands of lives a day. We're up towards 1 million deaths because of this. And so it was like, the house was on fire. It's like, if I just dump water on all my belongings, that seems really dumb, unless the detail that's missing is the house was on fire. Now, all of a sudden, that makes sense. It just feels like now I've just vented and I don't know that I have a question, but I guess I would ask, when the mayor says about sending the message, why is it that Kyrie is being used, I guess, as the kind of leverage point in a rule that affects thousands, if not millions of other people? It just feels a little bit wrong to me. Is it silly that he can't play? I think it's a little bit silly. But are we not doing the most good with this particular rule, despite the fact that it's imperfect in the way that it interacts with one Kyrie Irving, multimillionaire NBA basketball player?
Absolutely. You know, I think it's been pretty consistent from the city saying, hey, we want everyone to be vaccinated, right? And Kyrie is the only pro basketball player in New York City on either the Nets or the Knicks who has just decided not to get the shot. And this is what happens when you decide to not do that. Now, there is an exemption in this entire situation in one of these mandates that says people who don't live in New York City, Kyrie lives in New Jersey, right? People who do not live in New York City, who are pro athletes, don't have to follow the Key to New York City mandate if it's repealed. And the mandate's getting repealed, right? So there's another level of confusion here and I've spoken with team officials where they don't think the city understands their own writing, right? And that's kind of where we are right now. Everyone's trying to make sense of things that are just a lot complicated. So that's kind of, it's a waiting game.
Yeah, another thing that I think is confusing about this, and again, I have some bit of empathy for city and state officials who try to pass laws to serve public health in the middle of an emergency. There is the other part of this, which is that the law at one point, it seemed like it would keep Kyrie from being able to go to practice, say the Brooklyn Nets practice facility. But then because that was deemed a private business, he is able to go there. Now, why does that not apply then to the Barclays Center?
That is an incredible question. I'm not sure. I would assume it's because, practice is private, and at Barclays Center, you've got tens of thousands of attendees. You've got fans who want to interact with these folks. But at the same time, none of these fans are running onto the court. Right. Like the court in essence is kind of like the average fan, unless he's going to jump out like a football game and go streaking across the court, that's not going to happen. So that's kind of another area where a lot of people are confused as to what the actual spirit of this rule is. Because if Kyrie's the only unvaccinated player on the floor and he's testing daily, he's not positive, and no one else is at risk because he's in this confined area and not interacting with fans, then in a way, it's like, what are we actually doing here?
Takeline is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. I want to tell you about the easiest and most fun way to spice up your season. It's Underdog Fantasy and their brand new Pick'em game. Just pick over or under on your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog, woof woof, keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5. No need for an extra hand. Everything happens on one hand. Players, and you could take home some cold hard cash. NBA's back this week, and we have the absolutely misbegotten, struggling, ruinous Los Angeles Lakers recently getting booed at Staples Center versus the much improved defensively Dallas Mavericks on Tuesday night. Will LeBron go for 28 with the team losing by 30? Will the team simply implode, and will players just throw their jerseys down and walk out of the arena never to return? Find out Tuesday night. Sign up now with the code Takeline and you'll double your first deposit up to $100 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit of $10 or more. Deposit $100, you get $100 free. How much of this is this confusion is down to a change of leadership, essentially? Mayor de Blasio expended a lot of effort and political capital in various fights with city unions in order to get a lot of these rules put in place. And now he is off the scene. And now Eric Adams comes in, is something of an unknown quantity in the way he's going to run the city. How much of it comes down to that? Like, Eric's just like the new guy on the scene and we don't know what he's going to do.
Let me read a direct quote from Eric Adams this morning. He says, "I don't know who thought about putting such a rule in place that unvaccinated players on away teams can come in here and guys from New York can't." So that goes to show you right there. He kind of inherited a lot of what he's in right now. And then he follows up and says, "Hey, I have to follow the rules. If I don't, I'm going to open a door that's sending the wrong message to everyday employees." So in a way, his hands are kind of tied. It's like, hey, this is kind of what I've inherited. But if there is this wording that says, since Kyrie is living in New Jersey and he doesn't, and these mandates don't apply to people who are out of town, I think that's the route that the Nets are going to try to explore next, is whatever kind of wiggle room they can find in that wording. With
your conversations with City Hall and other city officials, do you sense that there is going to be some empathy towards that position?
No. I think that they want to, and Eric Adams said it earlier this morning, he's kind of hardline on this stance. They don't want to put out the message that, hey, you don't have to get vaccinated and you can loophole your way around the system, because there are tens of thousands of workers who don't have the platform and the stature and the money and the power that Kyrie Irving has. They don't want to cede to him and set a bad example for those guys. I've got family members who didn't want to get vaccinated and then had to because they would have lost their jobs otherwise, right? So what kind of message are you sending to those guys by letting Kyrie play? So I'm not sure that we see City Hall kind of bow down to one player. I don't think it's going to happen.
Nets owner Joe Tsai was at one point in time pretty hardline about the issue of Kyrie participating while being unvaccinated. He was very strongly against it, and that changed. What changed for the Nets that made them really soften their stance towards Kyrie participating in games?
Well, I'd say half the roster ended up testing positive for COVID. And at that point, the Nets said, hey, it's a matter of continuity. We don't want to have somebody coming in and out of the lineup. But when you've got 10 some odd players going into the health and safety protocols, well, what exactly is continuity, right? And at that moment, it's kind of like, okay, well, my mind immediately goes, okay, you're going to have this unvaccinated guy come back in the middle of the biggest outbreak of COVID in the NBA. That's kind of negligent in a way. But at the end of the day, if Kyrie wants to go out there and play, so be it. And then on top of that, you had players, you had Kevin, you had James, you had different players lobbying for the team to actually let Kyrie play. So those two things, those two factors, players going into health and safety protocols, and then star players lobbying for Kyrie ended up getting back on the floor.
So at the moment, the Nets are sitting in eighth, would have to take part in the play-in. They've obviously added Ben Simmons. He's not going to be available for a while. It's the last report was he's experienced some back tightness as he works back into conditioning. Obviously, has not played all season. What's the feeling around the team? I would imagine there's just so much uncertainty. But what's the feeling around the club about the weeks ahead as they head into the postseason?
Well, the Nets just got a huge victory against the Milwaukee Bucks. Really beat them on their own home floor. You remember what happened last year, that the Bucks sent them home in the playoffs. And, shoot around this morning, I asked Bruce Brown, hey, does this show you, or does this give you more confidence in what you guys might be able to do when you have all your pieces together? And he goes, yeah, I think we're going to be scary. And that's exactly why. And when you consider no Kevin Durant, I think is going to come back for that Miami game after these two Toronto games coming up. So that's Thursday. Eventually, you're going to welcome Ben Simmons in. It might not be before the Philly game. I know fans are going to say he's ducking that game, but back soreness, conditioning, whatever you want to call it, he might not play in that game. And now it looks like Joe Harris is ramping up, that he might not have to get that second surgery. And if you add all that up, combined with Andre Drummond, combined with Seth Curry, adding Goran Dragic, you've got a very complete team led by, Kevin Durant when he's healthy. I don't know where you have him. He's at least one of the top two players in this NBA. This team is confident, and I think they should be. So it's a long road. You got a short schedule to put it together, but they're confident that they can do it.
My conspiracy theory, which the listeners of Takeline have heard me spout before, is that the Nets obviously we're not incentivized to have home court.
Exactly.
And that, and to a certain extent, are comfortable being down here in the lower echelons of the bracket going forward. I think that's probably the case. Would you not say, Kristian?
Yeah. Fans tried to kill me earlier when I said they should intentionally tank so they don't have home court advantage. But here's where it gets tricky. If you end up in that play-in tournament game and you lose that first game, if you're 8th seed and you lose that 7-8 game, now you've got home court advantage against the 9-10, right? And if you're playing against Trae Young in that second game and you don't have Kyrie, that could go either way. So I don't know. I think the Nets want to get out of that play-in, but they're just too far behind the Celtics, I think, to make it happen.
What does your gut tell you? Eastern Conference Finals is a matchup between who?
Oh, the Nets and the Sixers. I think we're going to see that. I think the basketball gods are just waiting for that moment. And you just look at the way James Harden, Joel Embiid pair together.
Oh, it was scary.
That's bad.
It was really scary.
And then if you look at, to be honest, I think Andre Drummond, and it's crazy to say that he fixes so many of this team's issues. When you look at the rebounding, the paint presence, just the lob threat, Seth Curry with no Joe Harris, he fixes that. And to be honest, Kevin Durant, I watched Kevin Durant go on the floor with 4 rookies and beat the Philadelphia 76ers. So, he gives you a chance to win anytime. So I'm looking forward to that matchup. And on top of that, if the Nets do finish 7th or 8th, they're going to end up drawing either the Heat or the Bulls or maybe the Bucks if they win enough games. I think we're going to see Sixers and Nets in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think the basketball gods won't have it any other way.
He's Kristian Winfield. You can find his Knicks and Nets coverage at the New York Daily News. Kristian, thank you so much for joining Takeline.
Thanks for having me, man. Anytime.